Hello, I want to talk about the Enneagram 6 and the fear of being blamed. So, I'm not an Enneagram expert, but I've, thought about it a lot. I've read about it a lot. I've watched videos, content, and I am an Enneagram 6. So, I want to talk about some ways that the Enneagram 6 can be associated with this thing of being afraid of being blamed and how that can show up. And I can give some examples from my own life as well. So Enneagram 6 is the type on the Enneagram that is the most sort of closely related to this uh, thing of like having a complex relationship with authority. There are other types that can sort of have an issue with authority, and it can be something that isn't even related to Enneagram type. But the Enneagram 6 is very closely related to issues of authority. And this can show up in really fascinating ways, in really a mixture of different ways. It's a real variety of different ways. Some sixes will go against any kind of authority. Some sixes will sort of cling to some um, forms of authority and kind of go against others. And some sixes will kind of comply to sort of any sort of rules or some kind of structure. There's a lot of different ways that this can show up, but the fear of being blamed, I think it's something that isn't really talked about that much when it comes to Enneagram 6. But I think the fear of being blamed has to do with their um, relationship to authority. So it can be the person who is very sort of diligent, and even like hyper vigilant about sort of not being seen as making a mistake, or in some cases, the six really just doesn't want to do things wrong, what they consider to be wrong, because the six is sometimes called like one of the most sort of quote unquote humane types. So the six just genuinely doesn't want to, certainly some types of sixes, I mean, this can vary, but some types of sixes genuinely just don't want to do anything that harms other people, or anything that um, that messes something up, that messes up the system, or that messes up a situation. Now, the funny thing is that some sixes, because sixes are so contradictory and can show up in a myriad of different ways, some sixes will actually challenge authority and will want to create chaos. And some sixes also, I think probably a lot of, maybe most sixes, will have moments where they kind of lash out and create chaos, even though that is the thing that they're actually trying to avoid. And certainly I know that from my own life as well. So, uh, anyway, in terms of the fear of being blamed, for example, at school, I had this constant feeling of like, what if I do something wrong? It wasn't that I was, always kind of listening absolutely everything to that teachers said, but and trying to apply it all the time or something like that. But it was always this feeling of like having the rug almost like swept out from under my feet, and me being kind of left having to explain myself, or getting challenged by someone, or feeling nervous about, yeah, just being blamed for something. I think sixes, if they genuinely feel that they have done something wrong, a lot of sixes will, own up to that. It's part of that humane thing. Like, they will genuinely feel bad and they will genuinely own up to it. But there's this sense with the six, because the six is so sort of hyper vigilant, you know there's no sense of like calmness, in sense of, I haven't done anything wrong. I'm in a calm situation. You know, I I'm doing what is supposed to be done. Like, there's always a feeling that like something could go wrong, or maybe I did something wrong, even though I'm trying to do everything right. And so at school, I had certain moments where I did sort of try to do my work in a way that is really just, you know, almost like taking in all the rules and trying to follow them. But I also was at times kind of, in my own way, a little bit rebellious. Not super rebellious, but like a little bit in certain moments. I had certain moments at school, for example, where I would just challenge authority based on the way that I saw things to be better or something like that, if that makes any sense. So um, I think with six, like there is this, the key to six, to understanding six, is that there is contradictions. The six is very contradictory, and so they can uh, uh, sort of challenge authority, or they can try to follow it at all costs, and there can be a mixture of both. It's really, really complex to talk about and to really understand at a really deep level and to kind of really communicate it properly. So it's hard to communicate these things about like the psychology of a human being, and like a type of person. And of course we can't just put people into boxes and things like that, but I think the Enneagram has shown me and made it quite clear to me that there are psychological tendencies and psychological differences in people that can be explained by um, kind of an umbrella or a type. So we all kind of fit under some kind of umbrella. We all kind of have some kind of psychological tendencies that can be grouped. It's just that, it's not so specific. It's not so sort of black and white, but there are certain tendencies that can be explained psychologically, or psychological tendencies that can be explained like under an umbrella term, or under a type, so to speak. But yeah, the Enneagram 6 will uh, always, well, certain moments where the Enneagram 6 will be scared that they will be called out for something. And I think, it is just so much to do with this thing of being somehow attached, or interested, or somehow fascinated or scared by authority. And so, like, it can just happen that the sixes, you know, they will potentially lash out if they're being blamed, or they will start having some kind of physical reaction, or some kind of mental reaction to being blamed. Like they will get scared that what's going to happen now. Am I going to get thrown in jail? Am I going to get expelled? Am I going to get fired? Like there is this sense in a six's psychology that you know all these bad things are going to happen if I'm going to be found out, or if I'm going to be blamed for something. Um, and it's like this thing of like, I think with the six particularly, I would associate the six as being this type of person who, if they get called into someone's office, like a boss's office or a teacher's office or a principal's office or whatever it is, they will immediately start running in their minds like, what could it be? Maybe I did this, maybe I did that. How will I explain myself out of this situation? How will I like how will I react to this situation? It's this constant thing of being scared of that. Like it's not that the person is always scared of it consciously or actively, but there is always that fear that is motivating their behavior partly. So for example, I had a period at school where I was absent for quite a while, and or I was absent, a lot of different days, and I got sort of questioned about it and called out by it, and I was really scared. But I would immediately kind of almost clap back. So I would say that I would like give this kind of explanation that would kind of get me uh, out of trouble, but at the same time I would be like really scared that actually they won't believe me about my explanation, or that I'm going to get called out by it, or that I'm going to end up in the principal's office or something like that. Nothing like that happened, but it's this fear, because the six is attached to authority, whether that authority is being fair in the six's eyes, or whether that authority is taking advantage of other people. That can be another issue with the six, is that the six feels that some people misuse or abuse their own authority, and the sixes just don't feel comfortable with that at all. Like they're so tuned into people doing that. So if they feel that they're being blamed unfairly, for example, the six is the one that is going to kind of, and some other types, but the six is one of the types that will immediately have some kind of visceral reaction to that. Um, that this is not fair. And some of the things that I'm talking about may sound a little bit like Enneagram 1, but I don't fully deeply understand the Enneagram 1 psychology quite as much. So I don't actually know where the Enneagram 1 is in terms of being afraid of being blamed. I don't know how the 1 is generally kind of explained as being in terms of being blamed. I don't really know that. But I know that the Enneagram 6 can definitely be scared of being blamed. And, the Enneagram 6, certainly average sixes, they want to do things somewhat right. They want to make sure that they're contributing. There's a feeling of guilt with the six as well. So if you're not contributing enough, let's say if the six doesn't have a job, they might feel guilty that they're not contributing, because the six wants to be part, consciously or unconsciously, they want to be part of something bigger. And that's something that I didn't consciously understand about myself for ages, until I realized that I always kind of long for a group of like-mindedness, a group of like-minded people in my circle, and a group of just friends that are really like-minded. Or I'm feel guilty when I don't have a job. I feel like I'm not contributing properly, and it's this feeling of like being scared of being like called out for it, and found out for it, even if there are genuine explanations for it. But the six is so hyper vigilant that they can't help almost but to feel scared when there's a chance that they're going to be called out for something. So if someone says your name and come to my office or something like that, they will be the ones constantly running all these ideas in their head about what if this happens, what if that happens. Maybe they're going to call me out for this thing, maybe they're going to call me out for that thing, and what am I going to do? And maybe they have like visions of themselves escaping from the building or something. Like that is genuinely something that a six would do. Like they would have visions maybe of like literally running out of the building or something. And they wish that they could just do that, but at the same time they have a sense of decency and duty, that they have to just go to this person's office. They can't just run away because they were called in, and so they have to face up to the situation. So there's that. And I won't pretend to understand everything about the six of psychology in terms of like where this fear comes from, or why this particular fear is really the case in the six. But it's certainly one of the ways that I have seen and experienced and, investigated, that the six's fear can show up. That just general fear, six fear. It is that, they're scared of being, there's like a sense of being scared of somehow being called out for something or blamed for something, and they don't know how to deal with it maybe. And or maybe they get called out for something that they are not prepared for. Sixes want to be prepared, and so if someone calls them out for something that they haven't prepared for, they can take that really hard. And in terms of advice, I would say, for sixes, to deal with this fear of somehow being blamed or called out, I think just honestly, in terms of being a dutiful person, just keep doing that. You know, of course, in some ways, it's good for sixes to take risks and to step out of their comfort zone and to do something like a little bit quote unquote bad every once in a while, not be so sort of stuck in like I have to do everything right all the time. But in terms of um, getting called out for doing something wrong, I think sixes are like decent enough usually to want to do the right thing. So they are less likely to get called out then. But also, I feel like I have to say that there are so many sixes. Six is one of the most common types. It's just incredibly prevalent, and there's so many different shades of sixes. So there will also be sixes that are not dutiful, that almost call some kind of they're almost like calling for someone to call them out. They're almost like projecting, and they're attacking the system, or they're attacking authority, or they want to be seen as this person that like breaks down authority or something. So there's different shades of six, but I think one of the ways that the six can show up, one of the shades, is definitely the fear of being blamed, and how, that a lot of sixes are dutiful enough to uh, have no good reason really to be blamed for doing something terrible or something like that. So there's really nothing to worry about in most situations. But the six kind of blows things out of proportion almost. So I mean it does. Um, so it can definitely be one of the types that is most scared of this uh, blame being placed on them, because it's like they feel trapped and they want to get out of the situation, but at the same time they feel dutiful and they should own up to it, and or there's all these kinds of ways that it can show up. But anyway, this is quite long already, so I'm going to stop. I hope that it was interesting. I hope it was informative. And if you want more content from me, do subscribe. Thank you.